the new God of the wisest, the new gods of the wisest, the new God of the wisest, the new goddess of the wisest, the new goddesses of the wisest, the new goddess of the wisest, the old God of the wisest, the old gods of the wisest, the old God of the wisest, the old goddess of the wisest, the old goddesses of the wisest, the old goddess of the wisest, the greater God of the wisest, the greater gods of the wisest, the greater God of the wisest, the greater goddess of the wisest, the greater goddesses of the wisest, the greater goddess of the wisest, the lesser God of the wisest, the lesser gods of the wisest, the lesser God of the wisest, the lesser goddess of the wisest, the lesser goddesses of the wisest, the lesser goddess of the wisest, the higher God of the wisest, the higher gods of the wisest, the higher God of the wisest, the higher goddess of the wisest, the higher goddesses of the wisest, the higher goddess of the wisest, the lower God of the wisest, the lower gods of the wisest, the lower God of the wisest, the lower goddess of the wisest, the lower goddesses of the wisest, the lower goddess of the wisest, the greater spirit of the wisest, the greater spirits of the wisest, the greater spirit of the wisest, the lesser spirit of the wisest, the lesser spirits of the wisest, the lesser spirit of the wisest, the higher spirit of the wisest, the higher spirits of the wisest, the higher spirit of the wisest, the lower spirit of the wisest, the lower spirits of the wisest, the lower spirit of the wisest, the major God of the wisest, the major gods of the wisest, the major God of the wisest, the major goddess of the wisest, the major goddesses of the wisest, the major goddess of the wisest, the minor God of the wisest, the minor gods of the wisest, the minor God of the wisest, the minor goddess of the wisest, the minor goddesses of the wisest, the minor goddess of the wisest, the superior God of the wisest, the superior gods of the wisest, the superior God of the wisest, the superior goddess of the wisest, the superior goddesses of the wisest, the superior goddess of the wisest, the inferior God of the wisest, the inferior gods of the wisest, the inferior God of the wisest, the inferior goddess of the wisest, the inferior goddesses of the wisest, the inferior goddess of the wisest, the ancestor God of the wisest, the ancestor gods of the wisest, the ancestor God of the wisest, the ancestor goddess of the wisest, the ancestor goddesses of the wisest, the ancestor goddess of the wisest, the ascendant God of the wisest, the ascendant gods of the wisest, the ascendant God of the wisest, the ascendant goddess of the wisest, the ascendant goddesses of the wisest, the ascendant goddess of the wisest, the descendant God of the wisest, the descendant gods of the wisest, the descendant God of the wisest, the descendant goddess of the wisest, the descendant goddesses of the wisest, the descendant goddess of the wisest, the transcendent God of the wisest, the transcendent gods of the wisest, the transcendent God of the wisest, the transcendent goddess of the wisest, the transcendent goddesses of the wisest, the transcendent goddess of the wisest, the past God of the wisest, the past gods of the wisest, the past God of the wisest, the past goddess of the wisest, the past goddesses of the wisest, the past goddess of the wisest, the present God of the wisest, the present gods of the wisest, the present God of the wisest, the present goddess of the wisest, the present goddesses of the wisest, the present goddess of the wisest, the future God of the wisest, the future gods of the wisest, the future God of the wisest, the future goddess of the wisest, the future goddesses of the wisest, the future goddess of the wisest, the authentic God of the wisest, the authentic gods of the wisest, the authentic God of the wisest, the authentic goddess of the wisest, the authentic goddesses of the wisest, the authentic goddess of the wisest, the synthetic God of the wisest, the synthetic gods of the wisest, the synthetic God of the wisest, the synthetic goddess of the wisest, the synthetic goddesses of the wisest, the synthetic goddess of the wisest, the progressive God of the wisest, the progressive gods of the wisest, the progressive God of the wisest, the progressive goddess of the wisest, the progressive goddesses of the wisest, the progressive goddess of the wisest, the regressive God of the wisest, the regressive gods of the wisest, the regressive God of the wisest, the regressive goddess of the wisest, the regressive goddesses of the wisest, the regressive goddess of the wisest, the ordinary God of the wisest, the ordinary gods of the wisest, the ordinary God of the wisest, the ordinary goddess of the wisest, the ordinary goddesses of the wisest, the ordinary goddess of the wisest, the extraordinary God of the wisest, the extraordinary gods of the wisest, the extraordinary God of the wisest, the extraordinary goddess of the wisest, the extraordinary goddesses of the wisest, the extraordinary goddess of the wisest, the static God of the wisest, the static gods of the wisest, the static God of the wisest, the static goddess of the wisest, the static goddesses of the wisest, the static goddess of the wisest, the dynamic God of the wisest, the dynamic gods of the wisest, the dynamic God of the wisest, the dynamic goddess of the wisest, the dynamic goddesses of the wisest, the dynamic goddess of the wisest, the land God of the wisest, the land gods of the wisest, the land God of the wisest, the land goddess of the wisest, the land goddesses of the wisest, the land goddess of the wisest, the sea God of the wisest, the sea gods of the wisest, the sea God of the wisest, the sea goddess of the wisest, the sea goddesses of the wisest, the sea goddess of the wisest, the sky God of the wisest, the sky gods of the wisest, the sky God of the wisest, the sky goddess of the wisest, the sky goddesses of the wisest, the sky goddess of the wisest, the God of the wisest, the gods of the wisest, the God of the wisest, the goddess of the wisest, the goddesses of the wisest, the goddess of the wisest, the half God of the wisest, the half gods of the wisest, the half God of the wisest, the half goddess of the wisest, the half goddesses of the wisest, the half goddess of the wisest, the vessel of the wisest, the vessels of the wisest, the vessel of the wisest, the name of the wisest, the names of the wisest, the name of the wisest, the person of the wisest, the persons of the wisest, the person of the wisest, the persona of the wisest, the personas of the wisest, the persona of the wisest, the personage of the wisest, the personages of the wisest, the personage of the wisest, the personality of the wisest, the personalities of the wisest, the personality of the wisest, the personification of the wisest, the personifications of the wisest, the personification of the wisest, the image of the wisest, the images of the wisest, the image of the wisest, the imagination of the wisest, the imaginations of the wisest, the imagination of the wisest, the belief of the wisest, the beliefs of the wisest, the belief of the wisest, the thought of the wisest, the thoughts of the wisest, the thought of the wisest, the word of the wisest, the words of the wisest, the word of the wisest, the action of the wisest, the actions of the wisest, the action of the wisest, the reaction of the wisest, the reactions of the wisest, the reaction of the wisest, the feeling of the wisest, the feelings of the wisest, the feeling of the wisest, the situation of the wisest, the situations of the wisest, the situation of the wisest, the circumstance of the wisest, the circumstances of the wisest, the circumstance of the wisest, the environment of the wisest, the environments of the wisest, the environment of the wisest, the relationship of the wisest, the relationships of the wisest, the relationship of the wisest, the number of the wisest, the numbers of the wisest, the number of the wisest, the formula of the wisest, the formulas of the wisest, the formula of the wisest, the equation of the wisest, the equations of the wisest, the equation of the wisest, the theory of the wisest, the theories of the wisest, the theory of the wisest, the symbol of the wisest, the symbols of the wisest, the symbol of the wisest, the color of the wisest, the colors of the wisest, the color of the wisest, the thing of the wisest, the things of the wisest, the thing of the wisest, the way of the wisest, the ways of the wisest, the way of the wisest, the place of the wisest, the places of the wisest, the place of the wisest, the time of the wisest, the times of the wisest, the time of the wisest, the event of the wisest, the events of the wisest, the event of the wisest, the result of the wisest, the results of the wisest, the result of the wisest, the crown of the wisest, the crowns of the wisest, the crown of the wisest, the throne of the wisest, the thrones of the wisest, the throne of the wisest, the wisest king, the wisest kings, the wisest kingdom, the wisest kingdoms, the wisest king's subject, the wisest king's subjects, the wisest king's dominion, the wisest king's dominions, the kingdom of the wisest, the kingdoms of the wisest, the kingdom of the wisest queen, the wisest queens, the wisest queendom, the wisest queendoms, the wisest queen subject, the wisest queen subjects, the wisest queen's dominion, the wisest queen's dominions, the queendom of the wisest, the queendoms of the wisest, the queendom of the wisest prince, the wisest princes, the wisest princedom, the wisest princedoms, the wisest prince's subject, the wisest prince's subjects, the wisest prince's dominion, the wisest prince's dominions, the princedom of the wisest, the princedoms of the wisest, the princedom of the wisest princess, the wisest princesses, the wisest princessdom, the wisest princessdoms, the wisest princess's subject, the wisest princess's subjects, the wisest princess's dominion, the wisest princess's dominions, the princessdom of the wisest, the princessdoms of the wisest, the princessdom of the wisest, the lord of the wisest, the lords of the wisest, the lord of the wisest, the lordess of the wisest, the lordesses of the wisest, the lordess of the wisest, the priest of the wisest, the priests of the wisest, the priest of the wisest, the priestess of the wisest, the priestesses of the wisest, the priestess of the wisest, the ritual of the wisest, the rituals of the wisest, the ritual of the wisest, the shrine of the wisest, the shrines of the wisest, the shrine of the wisest, the temple of the wisest, the temples of the wisest, the temple of the wisest, the leader of the wisest, the leaders of the wisest, the leader of the wisest, the follower of the wisest, the followers of the wisest, the follower of the wisest, the natural substance of the wisest, the natural substances of the wisest, the natural substance of the wisest, the supernatural substance of the wisest, the supernatural substances of the wisest, the supernatural substance of the wisest, the temporal substance of the wisest, the temporal substances of the wisest, the temporal substance of the wisest, the spiritual substance of the wisest, the spiritual substances of the wisest, the spiritual substance of the wisest, the natural form of the wisest, the natural forms of the wisest, the natural form of the wisest, the supernatural form of the wisest, the supernatural forms of the wisest, the supernatural form of the wisest, the temporal form of the wisest, the temporal forms of the wisest, the temporal form of the wisest, the spiritual form of the wisest, the spiritual forms of the wisest, the spiritual form of the wisest, the age of the wisest, the ages of the wisest, the age of the wisest, the era of the wisest, the heiress of the wisest, the era of the wisest, the awakener of the wisest, the awakeners of the wisest, the awakener of the wisest, the awakening of the wisest, the awakenings of the wisest, the awakening of the wisest, the realm of the wisest, the realms of the wisest, the realm of the wisest, the dimension of the wisest, the dimensions of the wisest, the dimension of the wisest, the zone of the wisest, the zones of the wisest, the zone of the wisest, the frequency of the wisest, the frequencies of the wisest, the frequency of the wisest, the century of the wisest, the centuries of the wisest, the century of the wisest, the millennium of the wisest, the millenniums of the wisest, the millennium of the wisest, the purpose of the wisest, the purposes of the wisest, the purpose of the wisest, the meaning of the wisest, the meanings of the wisest, the meaning of the wisest, the culture of the wisest, the cultures of the wisest, the culture of the wisest, the demonstrator of the wisest, the demonstrators of the wisest, the demonstrator of the wisest, the demonstration of the wisest, the demonstrations of the wisest, the demonstration of the wisest, the manifester of the wisest, the manifestors of the wisest, the manifester of the wisest, the manifestation of the wisest, the manifestations of the wisest, the manifestation of the wisest, the presence of the wisest, the presences of the wisest, the presence of the wisest, the glow of the wisest, the glows of the wisest, the glow of the wisest, the goal of the wisest, the goals of the wisest, the goal of the wisest, the plan of the wisest, the plans of the wisest, the plan of the wisest, the book of the wisest, the books of the wisest, the book of the wisest, the philosopher of the wisest, the philosophers of the wisest, the philosopher of the wisest, the philosophy of the wisest, the philosophies of the wisest, the philosophy of the wisest, the releaser of the wisest, the releasers of the wisest, the releaser of the wisest, the release of the wisest, the releases of the wisest, the release of the wisest, the variable of the wisest, the variables of the wisest, the variable of the wisest, the cause of the wisest, the causes of the wisest, the cause of the wisest, the effect of the wisest, the effects of the wisest, the effect of the wisest, the journey of the wisest, the journeys of the wisest, the journey of the wisest, the emergence of the wisest, the emergences of the wisest, the emergence of the wisest, the source of the wisest, the sources of the wisest, the source of the wisest, the originator of the wisest, the originators of the wisest, the originator of the wisest, the origin of the wisest, the origins of the wisest, the origin of the wisest, the forefather of the wisest, the forefathers of the wisest, the forefather of the wisest, the foremother of the wisest, the foremothers of the wisest, the foremother of the wisest, the ancestor of the wisest, the ancestors of the wisest, the ancestor of the wisest, the descendant of the wisest, the descendants of the wisest, the descendant of the wisest, the lineage of the wisest, the lineages of the wisest, the lineage of the wisest, the heritage of the wisest, the heritages of the wisest, the heritage of the wisest, the heir of the wisest, the heirs of the wisest, the heir of the wisest, the co-heir of the wisest, the co-heirs of the wisest, the co-heir of the wisest, the joint heir of the wisest, the joint heirs of the wisest, the joint heir of the wisest, the dynasty of the wisest, the dynasties of the wisest, the dynasty of the wisest, the force of the wisest, the forces of the wisest, the force of the wisest, the law of the wisest, the laws of the wisest, the law of the wisest, the pact of the wisest, the pacts of the wisest, the pact of the wisest, the game of the wisest, the games of the wisest, the game of the wisest, the mask of the wisest, the masks of the wisest, the mask of the wisest, the armor of the wisest, the armors of the wisest, the armor of the wisest, the sword of the wisest, the swords of the wisest, the sword of the wisest, the shield of the wisest, the shields of the wisest, the shield of the wisest, the force shield of the wisest, the force shields of the wisest, the force shield of the wisest, the armored force shield of the wisest, the armored force shields of the wisest, the armored force shield of the wisest, the champion of the wisest, the champions of the wisest, the champion of the wisest, the guardian of the wisest, the guardians of the wisest, the guardian of the wisest, the defender of the wisest, the defenders of the wisest, the defender of the wisest, the protector of the wisest, the protectors of the wisest, the protector of the wisest, the chant of the wisest, the chants of the wisest, the chant of the wisest, the shape of the wisest, the shapes of the wisest, the shape of the wisest, the cube of the wisest, the cubes of the wisest, the cube of the wisest, the cuboid of the wisest, the cuboids of the wisest, the cuboid of the wisest, the sphere of the wisest, the spheres of the wisest, the sphere of the wisest, the spheroid of the wisest, the spheroids of the wisest, the spheroid of the wisest, the prism of the wisest, the prisms of the wisest, the prism of the wisest, the pyramid of the wisest, the pyramids of the wisest, the pyramid of the wisest, the cylinder of the wisest, the cylinders of the wisest, the cylinder of the wisest, the cone of the wisest, the cones of the wisest, the cone of the wisest, the triangle of the wisest, the triangles of the wisest, the triangle of the wisest, the circle of the wisest, the circles of the wisest, the circle of the wisest, the semicircle of the wisest, the semicircles of the wisest, the semicircle of the wisest, the square of the wisest, the squares of the wisest, the square of the wisest, the rectangle of the wisest, the rectangles of the wisest, the rectangle of the wisest, the parallelogram of the wisest, the parallelograms of the wisest, the parallelogram of the wisest, the rhombus of the wisest, the rhombuses of the wisest, the rhombus of the wisest, the trapezoid of the wisest, the trapezoids of the wisest, the trapezoid of the wisest, the polygon of the wisest, the polygons of the wisest, the polygon of the wisest, the pentagon of the wisest, the pentagons of the wisest, the pentagon of the wisest, the hexagon of the wisest, the hexagons of the wisest, the hexagon of the wisest, the septagon of the wisest, the septagons of the wisest, the septagon of the wisest, the octagon of the wisest, the octagons of the wisest, the octagon of the wisest, the nonagon of the wisest, the nonagons of the wisest, the nonagon of the wisest, the decagon of the wisest, the decagons of the wisest, the decagon of the wisest, the evolution of the wisest, the evolutions of the wisest, the evolution of the wisest, the revolution of the wisest, the revolutions of the wisest, the revolution of the wisest, the elemental art of the wisest, the elemental arts of the wisest, the elemental art of the wisest, the elemental science of the wisest, the elemental sciences of the wisest, the elemental science of the wisest, the elemental principle of the wisest, the elemental principles of the wisest, the elemental principle of the wisest, the elemental technology of the wisest, the elemental technologies of the wisest, the elemental technology of the wisest, the low elemental art of the wisest, the low elemental arts of the wisest, the low elemental art of the wisest, the low elemental science of the wisest, the low elemental sciences of the wisest, the low elemental science of the wisest, the low elemental principle of the wisest, the low elemental principles of the wisest, the low elemental principle of the wisest, the low elemental technology of the wisest, the low elemental technologies of the wisest, the low elemental technology of the wisest, the high elemental art of the wisest, the high elemental arts of the wisest, the high elemental art of the wisest, the high elemental science of the wisest, the high elemental sciences of the wisest, the high elemental science of the wisest, the high elemental principle of the wisest, the high elemental principles of the wisest, the high elemental principle of the wisest, the high elemental technology of the wisest, the high elemental technologies of the wisest, the high elemental technology of the wisest, the agent of the wisest, the agents of the wisest, the agent of the wisest, the agency of the wisest, the agencies of the wisest, the agency of the wisest, the amplifier of the wisest, the amplifiers of the wisest, the amplifier of the wisest, the amplification of the wisest, the amplifications of the wisest, the amplification of the wisest, the enhancer of the wisest, the enhancers of the wisest, the enhancer of the wisest, the enhancement of the wisest, the enhancements of the wisest, the enhancement of the wisest, the magnifier of the wisest, the magnifiers of the wisest, the magnifier of the wisest, the magnification of the wisest, the magnifications of the wisest, the magnification of the wisest, the influencer of the wisest, the influencers of the wisest, the influencer of the wisest, the influence of the wisest, the influences of the wisest, the influence of the wisest, the emanator of the wisest, the emanators of the wisest, the emanator of the wisest, the emanation of the wisest, the emanations of the wisest, the emanation of the wisest, the converger of the wisest, the convergers of the wisest, the converger of the wisest, the convergence of the wisest, the convergences of the wisest, the convergence of the wisest, the aura of the wisest, the auras of the wisest, the aura of the wisest, the impression of the wisest, the impressions of the wisest, the impression of the wisest, the intelligence of the wisest, the intelligences of the wisest, the intelligence of the wisest, the sophistication of the wisest, the sophistications of the wisest, the sophistication of the wisest, the genius of the wisest, the geniuses of the wisest, the genius of the wisest, the polymath of the wisest, the polymaths of the wisest, the polymath of the wisest, the psychic of the wisest, the psychics of the wisest, the psychic of the wisest, the knowledge of the wisest, the knowledges of the wisest, the knowledge of the wisest, the understanding of the wisest, the understandings of the wisest, the understanding of the wisest, the wisdom of the wisest, the wisdoms of the wisest, the wisdom of the wisest, the secret of the wisest, the secrets of the wisest, the secret of the wisest, the mystery of the wisest, the mysteries of the wisest, the mystery of the wisest, the revelation of the wisest, the revelations of the wisest, the revelation of the wisest, the tactic of the wisest, the tactics of the wisest, the tactic of the wisest, the strategy of the wisest, the strategies of the wisest, the strategy of the wisest, the strength of the wisest, the strengths of the wisest, the strength of the wisest, the might of the wisest, the mights of the wisest, the might of the wisest, the power of the wisest, the powers of the wisest, the power of the wisest, the authority of the wisest, the authorities of the wisest, the authority of the wisest, the dominion of the wisest, the dominions of the wisest, the dominion of the wisest, the rhythm of the wisest, the rhythms of the wisest, the rhythm of the wisest, the melody of the wisest, the melodies of the wisest, the melody of the wisest, the music of the wisest, the musics of the wisest, the music of the wisest, the lyric of the wisest, the lyrics of the wisest, the lyric of the wisest, the song of the wisest, the songs of the wisest, the song of the wisest, the dance of the wisest, the dances of the wisest, the dance of the wisest, the spirit of the wisest, the spirits of the wisest, the spirit of the wisest, the soul of the wisest, the souls of the wisest, the soul of the wisest, the body of the wisest, the bodies of the wisest, the body of the wisest, the mark of the wisest, the marks of the wisest, the mark of the wisest, the promise of the wisest, the promises of the wisest, the promise of the wisest, the visionary of the wisest, the visionaries of the wisest, the visionary of the wisest, the vision of the wisest, the visions of the wisest, the vision of the wisest, the picture of the wisest, the pictures of the wisest, the picture of the wisest, the sound of the wisest, the sounds of the wisest, the sound of the wisest, the tongue of the wisest, the tongues of the wisest, the tongue of the wisest, the language of the wisest, the languages of the wisest, the language of the wisest, the communication of the wisest, the communications of the wisest, the communication of the wisest, the people of the wisest, the peoples of the wisest, the people of the wisest, the society of the wisest, the societies of the wisest, the society of the wisest, the fortress of the wisest, the fortresses of the wisest, the fortress of the wisest, the government of the wisest, the governments of the wisest, the government of the wisest, the city of the wisest, the cities of the wisest, the city of the wisest, the nation of the wisest, the nations of the wisest, the nation of the wisest, the civilization of the wisest, the civilizations of the wisest, the civilization of the wisest, the world of the wisest, the worlds of the wisest, the world of the wisest,